Click on it. Oh, got it. Right there in the middle of the screen. Okay, got it. You should be able to turn it on. Yeah.
The same thing.
Hit the drop down. Now it's showing it. Click it again. There you go. Okay. Good evening. I'm going to call the board meeting to order. Thank you for joining us for this special board meeting on March 13th. We appreciate you being here. We are going to start this meeting with open session. We will adjourn to closed session and then come back after. We start with the flag salute. Please stand and put your right hand over your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next item is approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So,
Second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
yes,
Aye.
That's 5-0 passes. The next item is public comments. Do we have public comments? Is anybody in the audience planning on doing public comment that we haven't received a card for yet? All right, we have no public comments then. We will move to the standing fiscal item. Ms. Luke? Are you over there? I can't see you. Okay, we will be looking at you via the Zoom camera. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Thank you for having me with you this evening. I need to get my voice at the right level for you, don't I, David? Okay. Thank you.
I don't hear her. I mean, I
Okay.
hear her gently.
Can
but
you hear
not-
me now?
That's getting better.
All righty. So tonight is another step on your journey to financial stability, and it is a journey of many steps, decisions, processes, and reports, and it will take time. And I think there's a lot of anxiety over how much time it takes. But I want to talk a little bit about that as we go through the process to bring some clarity to that piece. But first, I want to just revisit, as I did last time, to say, what have you done so far? Because you've done so much. And I think you need to take a moment and realize that. Significant work has been done on your position control system, aligning your categorical budgets, your budget assumptions and projections. And that's been done by your staff and in conjunction with VCOE. They have spent many, many, many hours coordinating back and forth with your staff to see if we can't bring a document that really has a reflection of what your costs currently are, where you're at moving forward. So we're real pleased about that. You've made your school consolidation decision a major step towards solvency, both from a fiscal perspective and from an instructional perspective. One of the most positive moves that you can make going forward in your instructional program to really bring that education to the best it can be. You've done your preliminary notices, your otherwise known as the March 15th notices. You have approved that list. And I know that was heart-wrenching and that was a tough decision. And you as a board took that step. And I think that is extremely significant. And that's what's going to pull you through in your multi-year as you move forward. So what is next? It's the second interim report that's before you tonight. And I know I need to explain the journey a bit because I think there's a little disappointment as to I am recommending that it be a negative certification. And that kind of says, oh my gosh, we've done something wrong. Well, it's not that you've done something wrong. It's that you are in the middle of your journey in fixing this district. You have gone through all those steps. You've looked at the reductions. You've sent out the preliminary notices. Now you're at that point where your next step is going to be your May 15th notices by May 15th. And that's a validation. So right now you developed a plan, and what needs to happen is to see the implementation of that plan, to see the board take that next step, which you couldn't take it at this point in time. It's not appropriate. You need the time to look at the reductions, really understand all of the pieces, how they coordinate, and how the work is going to be done once those people are no longer with you. So it wouldn't be appropriate. So you are moving forward. You're moving forward just as you should be. And I don't want you to feel it's a negative. It is not. And with your negative certification, VCOE will be able to continue providing additional support with you, just so you're aware of that. That is one of the hard to say a positive from a negative, but it is. And I think that has great value to you. Now, with this, you will most likely be doing a third interim, and that's a report that's due on June 1st. And it looks at what have you actually spent through April 30th? What have you spent? What are you projecting for the rest of the year? And it's like giving an updated snapshot on your general fund. And in reality, when you do a third interim, it's really happening at the same time you're doing your budget development for next year, because in your June budget document, you need to show your projected actuals for the year. And so the third interim is basically saying, show us your projected actuals for the year. So yes, you are doing an additional document, but it's with the same information that you are going to be using in your June budget adoption. So it won't be as labor intense as you might think going forward. And we'll be working very, very closely to make sure that that gets done. So I want you to think you really are doing well. Truly, truly, you are doing well. So what is next? You have your 21-22 audit, and that's when that document is finalized, the auditor will be here to present the document to you. You'll receive it, and then he will go through and talk about the findings and really be available to answer any questions you might have regarding that document and what needs to happen to move forward with the findings. After that, the most critical timeline would be that May 15th for your final notice to employees. And if any positions are being considered to be rescinded from a layoff or reinstated, you need to think about, is there an equivalent reduction in 23-24, an expense that you could identify so that you can balance out that takeout? If you're reducing a position here, is there something else you can if you're adding a position back, is there another place you can reduce to kind of counterbalance as you move forward? I will say the reconciliation work is not done, and that's something that we're going to be your staff is focusing on. You still are working and finalizing the ASB, the donation accounts, and I really want to look at the balance sheet accounts. That would be your prior year accounts receivables and payables. They should be clearing out by now, and any intra-district items that might be in your balance sheet. So we're going to be checking that out. Closing the books for 22-23. That's going to be in July and August. June 30th is the end of your fiscal year. And then what happens in the school budgeting is they give us a window of time after June 30th to really sit and get the information in on payroll, to set up the accounts receivables, the accounts payables, and do an analysis. And that happens in July, and it's finalized into you September 15th as you move forward. And that's called that's called the unaudited actuals. The report that comes out at the end of that closing of the books is the unaudited actuals. And it will come to you by September 15th. Your audit report, I have every expectation that it will be on time this year. and that your 22-23 audit, you should have it by December 15th. And that also is going to give you a piece of your roadmap. And I really want to kind of coach the expectations a little bit, because your 22-23 audit is going to have some challenges in it because it's auditing this year where all of this is happening. And so you're going to see maybe some findings, and you will notice them and say, I remember that, we took care of it. That doesn't mean that it's not going to be in the report as the auditors go through and do their process. So in the 22-23 audit, the auditors will look at all the findings that are in the report that you're going to be getting for 21-22, and what actions have you done to take care of those findings. And then they're going to look at your 22-23 year and really have an analysis on that. And I would expect that they would have a few things to recommend, because you've had a tough year. You know it, you've been living it. And that's okay. At the end of the day, you're really doing well pulling it together. I would say that I think the board should consider a long-term plan of increasing its reserves. When you look at your 3-year projected ending fund balance, and as you have a balance there to work with, you should really give some thought as to, is 3% enough? And maybe we should make it a 6 or a 10%, because the size your district is, you can have one item and it just throws your budget, you know, in that 3%. And 3% is $1 million. It is not that difficult to have an entry that's for 200,000 or 300,000. And you don't want to be cutting an edge so close that you get unstabilized by an event like that. And I would say, kind of in summary, this is a journey. It took a couple years to reach this point, and it's really going to take you a couple of years to get out, just in the sense of making the reductions, then implementing and going through all of the processes and reports that really validate that you have succeeded and you're on a smooth path. And I just don't want you to get too frustrated with that timeline, because it is a timeline, but it's one that you need to go through. And I would also say that I really feel that it would be great if you could get an interim CBO in here to really work on a daily basis. And I did speak to VCOE. They said that they've thought of a couple people that might have some interest. And this would be somebody that you would bring in on a consulting contract and establish a daily rate per se, and then have them working with Ryan and in the office, because I think that would move you faster along the way. And as we see that happening, then I can back off on my time. And I think it would be more cost effective for you to have an interim in here, an interim CBO, more of their time, less of my time, from a cost perspective and from an operational perspective. I think that would be better suited for what your needs are currently moving forward. That's really all I had to say. And I wasn't going to present on the second interim. I would say I attached my pages and it's kind of my format that I look at when I'm looking at a budget report. And I put a summary in there for every one of your funds, so you could see historically what you've used and what you've gotten in revenue and what you've spent in adult ed and your building fund and your developer fee fund. And we haven't really talked about all of those, but I just wanted to share with you, since I had that information, and it's as a reference for you moving forward. And I think that's all I have for this evening. Are there any questions I can respond to you? I will be with Ryan when he does the second interim also. Okay. Pardon me?
Do you mean the third interim?
I do have a question.
Oh, I mean, when he presents the second interim this evening, I'm going to be available with him as well.
So Ava, it's awkward not seeing you, but I have several questions. I believe that you presented this is your, I can't even show you this. Can you see that?
Yes, I
That is
can.
your summary, correct?
That is my summary. yes.
Okay, so do you have it with you?
I do.
Okay, so I have several questions walking through it, mostly on the unrestricted, mostly on pages 1 through 5, which focuses on this year's budget, which I found some things I found interesting and just needed to understand. So if we start right at the fact that certificated salaries, first interim, we projected we were going to spend about 8.5 million, and now we're projecting 7.75 and I noticed that it's kind of equally spread between less teacher salaries for this school year and less certificated supervisors and administrative salaries. Is that based because you were able to switch some over into the restricted general fund and find a way to support them? Or is that because we literally had less staff than we anticipated we were going to have during?
Okay. And I will ask you, which page number? after you said
This is
all of
page
that?
2.
Okay. I would say that if you want to have a view of the salaries and because it does switch back and forth, there is a summary in here that combines it. And that will give you, I think, more of an answer to your question.
Okay, so if I
Let me
look at,
find that page for you.
if I look at the general, where we might see that some of it got switched over to being able to pay out of restricted funds, is that what you're saying?
Okay. If you look at page 13.
Okay,
And so on this page, it pulls together restricted and unrestricted. So it tells you whether, how much is spent in total in the general fund. And that way you don't have to worry whether it was just switched back and forth. You can see the grand total. Is that helpful?
yes. Increase from, okay, yeah, I see actually it, but so. I
Because there was
still,
a
if you
lot of,
look, so if you're on page 13, if you look at the total certificated salaries for 2022, 23 in the first interim was 12,755, and now it's 12,288, a difference of almost $500,000. And I'll ask that question again: is why did they go down $500,000 this year?
it went down because at second interim, there was a great deal of time spent looking at actual positions and projecting out and going through the position control system. First interim, there were a lot of issues within that document. And so at second interim, the county worked directly with Ryan and they went through and did a more detailed analysis on the salaries and made adjustments as they felt appropriate. And Ryan, do speak up if I'm saying something incorrectly. Thank you. Okay.
Okay. And then I'll ask both Ava and Ryan to speak up. So there also was we're projecting much less being given to special ed. And is that because we were able to find money in restricted to support special ed? So we're actually giving much less from unrestricted. I think it was a scale of about $900,000 less to special ed.
Correct.
This year.
So I think that's made up of two components. I believe one is on the revenue, that there was additional revenue that came in for special education. And so that was a piece. And I believe there was also a piece where there was some aides that were brought onto payroll versus being contracted out. Was that special ed?
The reduction in the special ed cost was, it wasn't that we had additional revenue that came in this year. We were able to recognize part of a grant or more revenue from a grant that we had previously not used, that we had sitting at VCOE. So we were able to move employees into this restricted program, which allowed us to lower our contribution to special ed as an overall.
Yeah, it was I mean, it literally saved the unrestricted general fund in the second interim is 3.3 million for special ed versus 4.2. So that's quite a savings. I presume that was just, like you said, able to find restricted dollars, because that's actual money we gave to special ed.
It was the SELPA, correct? Brian?
I'm sorry, say it again?
Was it the SELPA funds?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Those were just obvious large numbers. Thanks very much.
Any other board member questions?
I do. Hi there. Can you hear me? I'm curious, and I know we spoke about it briefly on the phone, but I want to speak about it in public and ask the same questions. The numbers look really, really good. And from what I understand, you all have been able to verify that they are as accurate as possible under the existing circumstances.
That is correct.
If I hear you correctly, if we do anything other than certify negative, even though the numbers look really good, and in the second and third year, we've got projected an enormous amount of reserves, well over the mandated requirement. If we do anything other than certify negative, we stop getting assistance.
That would be true.
If we certified positive, then statutorily, VCOE can't give us any assistance starting tomorrow, basically.
They would be providing their basic assistance that they do for districts. You would not have me here. You would be working with their staff as much as they could.
All right, and if we certified qualified, then we'd be in the same situation unless for some reason VCOE downgraded us to negative, as happened a few months ago.
That is true. And truly, the reason that you would be negative is that you haven't reached that timeline to actually implement that plan that you developed. You haven't reached that point where you're finalizing your May 15th notices. Right now, you're at a point where you have a really good plan and they need to see that implemented.
Do I understand that in past years, the March 15th proposed layoffs, for lack of a better word, by the time May came around, they were not implemented?
That is my understanding. They were not implemented in total in prior years.
So there's a concern that that might happen again with us?
That's true, but that honestly, that would be a concern with any district because it is not unusual for a district to develop a plan and get down to that last moment and people in the audience are upset, there's pressure, and so they step back and they don't implement. And so it is not uncommon, that's something that is of concern.
But that concern, would that be on a magnitude far greater than that we talked about at the previous meeting when I asked you if there was some wiggle room in what we had to work with? And you said, yeah, looking at the numbers now, there's probably a 2 or 3 FTE wiggle rooms, seeing how things go forward for the multi-year projections, et cetera. So you're talking about something on a greater magnitude than that.
I think I said 1 to 2.
Is the concern. I'm just trying to figure out the concern.
So if, for example, your ending fund balance shot way up at the end of the year, if there were other factors and the governor's budget came in and as you were hitting that timeline, you didn't implement all of the reductions you had because you had new information, you had additional information. You always need to consider that. So do I still believe you can shift it a bit? I do, but I think you need to take that that comment with caution and know that you should see, is there another way you can balance out those dollar amounts, whether it's through another reduction or additional revenue coming in or analysis. But there is room. I mean,
All right, I'm just trying to make sure
Yep.
I get it clear, because, you know, a couple of months ago, my first meeting, I took a look at the numbers and they just didn't seem right. So I said, no, this can't be a positive because we're going to be in the whole second year and third year. Now I look at the numbers again with greater confidence, having had you all working on it with staff for the last couple of months, and the numbers are totally different. We're going to be better in the second year and better in the third year. And I'm just trying to struggle where we are, but I guess what I hear you saying is the process isn't finished. We still need the help. What's the harm in doing it this way for a couple of more months, even if it's the extra work of a third interim, so that you all are satisfied that everything is buttoned up?
it is, it really takes time and you know, as you recall, the projection was the district would end with $1 million and then it was a negative 34,000. So you can have numbers on a paper and there is a perceived plan, but until you actually see the end result, you go with caution, and that's where we're at this point. We're going with caution until we see the end result.
Last question, I guess I have, it's two questions, actually. Did you look at all the numbers in the second interim?
Did I personally? I really, I look at big numbers.
Okay.
Should I say, I look at, does it seem reasonable? And I ask a lot of questions. I do know that I was included on all the emails going back and forth, and I saw numerous emails between your staff and VCOE validating numbers, answering questions. So I have confidence in those salary numbers because I think that they were vetted. I still had a question in my mind about classified salaries because it went up so much from last year. And so I'm working on validating that in my mind because it was such a big jump. But if it's incorrect, it means you'll have a bigger ending fund balance. It's not going to be to your negative. That's one where I'm still looking and pausing for a moment to think about.
Second part of the question was, did you see, I understand the reasons you're recommending that we consider negative certification. Did you see anything in the big picture numbers that you saw that jumped out at you and said, certify negative because of those numbers?
No, I did not. I did not. I do know that in the future, you may have some adjustments because from looking at the balance sheet and some of the reconciliations, but as far as your actual budget, no, I didn't see anything that gave me pause. It seemed reasonable to me.
All right. Thanks for helping me think it through. Appreciate it.
Mhm.
Question for Ryan. Oh, sorry, did I jump in front of somebody?
No, I just want to say we have another item coming up where Ryan's going to present the
Oh,
second
I
interim.
I
So if
apologize.
you guys have any more questions for
I'm sorry.
Ava or Ms. Luke, then anybody have more questions for her before? Okay. So we can move on to 3.2, approval and certification of second interim. And we have a presentation by Ryan.
Can you highlight me over here for the PowerPoint? Or how do I? How do I get the PowerPoint on the screen? Oh, that's right. That's right. Well, that's not what I wanted. Why is it keeps kicking me out? Got it. Okay, there we go. Yeah, no, it was just, it kept kicking me out. I got it. All right. All right, so there's audio, hold on. Okay. During the last meeting, Phil, you asked me a question about a check that was to VCOE for $142,000. We moved on before I was able to address it so that the public could hear what it was for, but it was a check for special ed for excess cost. Okay, yeah, I could hear the feedback. On,
So that check to VCOE was for special ed for some.
for excess cost,
Pardon?
excess cost. Okay, are we good now with the feedback? There's still feedback. Where's the TV?
The TV.
Okay, let's try this again.
Sounds good.
All right, good. Now we don't have an echo. All right, finally. All right, first slide, pretty self-explanatory. Second slide is. Right. So this is where we are currently within the budget cycle. We're currently doing our report on the second interim budget. Following that, we'll have our LCAP budget planning. As Eva mentioned earlier, if we do have a negative certification, we will have a third interim. All right.
David, I'm sorry, I can just barely hear Ryan. It may be me, but I would really like to hear this. Thanks.
All right, Jim, can you hear me?
That's great.
Okay, so again, this is where we're at currently within the budget process. We're currently doing our report on our second interim. There is the potential that we will have a third interim if the budget is given a negative certification. But currently, this is where we are in the budget process. Upcoming, we have the LCAP and budget planning. We'll have the May revise, and then we'll move into our adopted budget, which is still up in the air, how that will proceed with the potential third interim. Great. Did that work? Okay. So this is kind of a little bit of a recap for people who've heard it before, but for people who aren't fully understanding everything or the different types of funds, we have unrestricted funds. Those can be used on pretty much anything for any educational purpose. And then we have restricted funds that are sometimes called categorical funds, and they can be ongoing or they can be restricted. But the important thing to remember when it comes to restricted funds is that they can only be spent on very specific things. There's usually a plan that goes along with something if it's a grant, and we have to follow that spending plan and then do reporting out on it. So that way all of our funds are accounted for. When going through and preparing the second interim budget, we use the assumptions that were on the school services dartboard. Some notable things for next year is that they're predicting currently an 8.13% COLA. We've heard that it may drop down further. We don't know. And there's also going to be at least currently a 1.67% increase in PERS next year, which is another cost that we have to take into consideration for next year's budget. And also, if anybody has questions as I'm going through this, please feel free to ask me. These are the enrollment assumptions that were used when generating the second interim budget. Part of my work with VCOE was we went through the LCFF calculator together. I sent them the one that I was using and they validated the numbers that were in there. They sent me back an LCFF calculator that had all the correct assumptions in it. And that was what was used as the foundation for completing the second interim budget report. We wanted to make sure that we were able to start out on the same point of, okay, these are the numbers that we project that you're supposed to be using, and these are the numbers that we're actually using, and so on and so forth, because it makes a big difference. As we learned last year with the second interim, if you use the wrong ADA assumption, you're going to say that our enrollment is flat when it's actually not, it's declining. And you can see that we are in declining enrollment.
Ryan,
Yes.
could you tell me how much, I think Cheryl said last week, but what are we, because we've all known, we've got plenty of emails about parents who are going to pull their kids out of the district. What percentage or what number of students less is this because of, not because of declining enrollment, but because of unenrollment?
You know, I don't have the exact figure for what we're projecting the full loss to be. I know that we're estimating it to be about 5%.
But okay, so well, that's, I just wanted to make that, yeah, so that's 5% of 2,000 then. So approximately 100 students going elsewhere who otherwise would be in, would have stayed in our district.
Potentially.
Okay, it's hard to know until we've.
It's hard
But
to know
that-
until
that-
somebody.
At least that seems that doesn't seem like it's, well, it's conservative from what I hear, but at least it's triple digits, so.
Yeah, and that was as we project staffing that we took those things into consideration, which is a little bit slightly different than the projection here, which is for second interim specifically. I'm not exactly sure what percentages went into choosing these particular assumptions for next year, but when I was referring to the K-8 and a loss of 5%, I was referring to the staffing calculations for what we might need at the most conservative level.
Okay.
We're hoping that a lot more come.
Yeah.
Ryan, can you explain funded ADA, just for those who may be curious?
Yes, funded ADA currently is the amount of money you actually get per student, and it's based on your ADA for kids who enroll. It's based on UPP, which is your unduplicated percentage. And so right now, the LCFF calculator takes into account a 3-year rolling average, which is why it looks like our funded ADA is a little bit higher for this year than it is than our actual enrollment projections. Because the way that they take all of your the ADA is the kids who come to school, and that's what helps generate all of the revenue that you get for the year. The factors that go into what's actually funded, like I said a moment ago, is your enrollment or not enrollment, I'm sorry, attendance. So right now, I think OHI is trending on about 90.1 or 90.5-ish. Cheryl, does that sound about right?
I don't know the actual number.
I think in the LCFF calculator, it was about 90.91-ish, 90, 91.
Yes.
But it's the 3-year average ADA, or average daily attendance for people who don't speak acronym. That is projected automatically based off of the prior 3 years ADA that the state gives us. Is that correct in the LCFF calculator?
Yes. VCOE and I went through those numbers together. This is the timeline for the work that's gone into the second interim. On January 12th, we all read the same letter. And about that day on is when we really started working together to get all of the budget assumptions cleaned up. By February 14th, I had worked with VCOE to confirm the LCFF numbers. And then on the 21st, we submitted our first draft to VCOE of the second interim. And then they returned it to us the following, or on the 28th for us to start making the final changes, which were what I was working on up until the 9th. We went over everything, Eva and I did on the 10th, and then we gave everything to the school board as well as submitted it to VCOE. And now we're here voting on it.
Ryan, I'd like to ask another question here. We submitted obviously first interim on December 15th and got a letter on January 11th advising us that we are being downgraded. Are we anticipating a typical 3 to 4 week review time from VCOE before they come back and say your second interim has been accepted? I realize we've got this sort of tentative, it looks good, but do we get a final something from them if from that 3-4 weeks after we submitted?
I don't anticipate it taking as long the first time. Near the end of December last year, we had a shutdown for holidays and their review was delayed because I was on vacation for a couple of weeks and I couldn't answer some of their technical questions. So currently, I don't think that it's going to take the same amount of time to review our second interim.
So we're likely going to have a response back by the April board meeting.
I can't specify on their timeline. I would say it sounds reasonable, but that's something that we would have to work with VCOE to get that information on.
Thanks.
Okay, these are as more of a visual representation of the staffing reductions that were voted on last board meeting that are currently within this budget. David, is there a way to move this little mirror or the little window pane over here? Because I have it minimized on my screen. Okay. Okay, so this is a screenshot from our multi-year that we submitted with our second interim. This shows our expenditures on a year-by-year basis. This year, we're expecting to spend about $36 million when it's all said and done. By the end of next year, we're expecting to have that down to about $30 million. And then again, reduced a little bit more the following year by about another 100,000 or so. To answer a question from earlier, I believe there's a question about the reduction in what we need to contribute from unrestricted to restricted. From the first interim, that number was projected to be about $5.5 million through a lot of the recoding and utilizing of some of the grants, or not grants, but specialized buckets of money that we have available to us this year. We've been able to reduce our projected donation to the restricted programs by 17%. And as you can see, that number continues to stay flat in the out years, whereas before it was expected to grow almost exponentially.
This is special ed.
This is a mixture of special ed as well as our contribution to our restricted maintenance.
Give me an order of magnitude. What percentage roughly is special ed?
I would say special ed makes up about 90%, 85 to 90% of our contributions from unrestricted to restricted.
And I tried to understand this a meeting or two ago, see if I have it right. It's because the federal government and the state government mandate certain special ed programs and personnel, et cetera, but they don't end up giving us enough money to pay for them.
Correct. So special ed students can be legally required to have any number of things that cost any number of amount, and you have to provide it for them. And then our bucket that we get for the entire year is only $1.7 million for special ed-ish. So you really have to donate a lot from your unrestricted program just to fund the mandated costs for special ed.
I would say I hate to use the word donate because
Or not
our
donate, I'm
job is to
sorry.
support all children regardless of the cost. And it's really important that we are ensuring all of our kids have a great education.
Does anybody know if there's anything in the works for either the federal or state governments to provide more funding for special ed?
I know this is an area that has been lobbied for decades, and we've seen very little movement.
Thanks.
And it's still continually discussed at the legislative level. I know CSBA took a contingent of board members to Washington DC last year and continue to do that again this year. And this is one of the big topics. This doesn't just affect our district. This is pretty universal.
But nothing specific in the works as we speak.
The reductions that we've made for our books and supplies from this year to next year are on the screen. There's an overall reduction of about $630,000. We were able to reduce some areas of textbooks that were over budgeted by about 25,000. Some other books and reference materials we realized were under budgeted, so we put some more funds there to ensure that we would have enough for potential expenditures. We were able to reduce materials and supplies by about $80,000. And I know that most people are looking at this giant $573,000 number at the bottom. And this is through a reduction in some of our restricted programs for equipment, but it's also because when it comes to our restricted programs, like the bulk of this comes from our strong workforce program. In order to actually receive those funds, we have to show them spent because it's an unearned revenue account. So in order for us to use the funds, we show them in our budget. We show that we spend them on verified programs that fall under the guidelines of whatever Dr. Knox and Kim Hoy have come up with for strong workforce. We submit the claim forms for them, and then we're reimbursed for our revenue for them, or we're reimbursed for the expenses. So since we have, for our strong workforce program, we're recognizing about 3 or 4 years worth of grants this year because we have the funding information for them. So in order to show them as spent, we have them in the budget and then the reduction for next year.
That means we won't be spending next year by
It's not necessarily true because if we don't spend all the money this year, then so our strong workforce program is something that it can't have a fund balance, which means it needs to show spent. Because it can't have an ongoing rolling balance like some of our other restricted pots of money. And so we're recognizing the grant information or the revenue for it this year and then showing it spent so we can be in compliance with the strong workforce plan. But this is all something that's still being reconciled and will most likely be updated by third interim. As we move on to the next slide, we're looking at essentially the same slide, but this one goes over our services and other operating expenditures. We've been able to reduce in all of these areas next year with what we believe will be ongoing reductions. The biggest one being that reduction in professional services, which a large part of that will be the fiscal oversight from VCOE, as well as the financial consultants that I've been using to help with the work that I've been doing.
I didn't hear the second part.
I said the biggest reduction for our services and other operating expenditures, the biggest reduction is in our professional consulting services, which the bulk of that reduction is going to be from not needing to have a fiscal advisor for the following year, as well as not needing continued fiscal support for myself next year.
Was Ryan, when we were short in special ed and spent over $200,000 in bringing in help for special ed, is that a professional service or does that go under salaries?
That's a professional service.
That's also,
Yes.
we're better staffed now in special ed, so we're not going to need to hire out from services to get special ed help.
There's always a possibility that we might need to contract out further. Currently, we're trying to increase our staffing levels so that we won't need to use outside services.
Okay.
Ryan, I had a question. When referencing the professional consultant services, you said it's a mixture of a combination of factors, but mostly the fiscal advisor that was assigned to the district. Am I correct in that you're referring to Ms. Luke from the county, or were you referring to another fiscal?
No, Miss Luke and then Miss Nils.
Got it. And the second part is the consulting that we've been getting for the help for this. Am I correct on that? So when you say that, are you referring just to this work on the second interim from the county side, or are you referring to also consultants that this district has been using in the past to do this work as well?
So the biggest reduction is going to be from the current consultants we're using, but we also have reductions because we've been able to hire more staff for special ed, so we don't have to contract out. So the reduction in the professional services is a combination of fiscal consultants, advisors, and then special ed staff.
Okay, thank you. I was just trying to understand a very raw breakdown of those percentages of within that category. So thank you.
And then this is the final slide with the $3 million in reductions that we have. We're projecting that next year we're going to have a total unrestricted ending fund balance of 4.4 million with a unappropriated balance of 3.5 next year, and then 5.17 the following year. That's it. Any
Is that the end
questions?
of your presentation?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have additional questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
I've been sitting on this one. I didn't know if I needed to ask it to Ms. Luke or to Mr. Worsham, but this is perfect. I'll ask it right now. And it's regarding our bond rating. So I apologize for not submitting this question in advance. And if it takes time for you to give me that answer, I'll gladly take it. I'm looking here at an email we got a while back on February 14th. So it's a Valentine's Day email from an advisor over at ISOM Advisors about our bond rating. This was notifying us that it was being downgraded from AA negative to A negative. And it was saying, first and foremost, this will have no impact on your taxpayers related to your current outstanding bonds. Second, while this is a downgrade, you still have a very high credit rating in general, and unlimited tax general obligation bonds are some of the most desired bonds by investors since they are always repaid. So this goes to my question, specifically maybe to Ms. Luke or to you as well, Mr. Worsham. Can I get some more understanding as to maybe why this might seem like a very simple question. We're trying to understand why that our bond was initially downgraded, if it was the FICMA report, if it was the initial negative certification or a combination of both, because what I'm really asking is, if we certify negative tonight, does that have any future cause for concern that they may also continue to jeopardize our bond rating? So I wasn't sure if you all did any research on that or can provide for any information on that aspect. If we certify negative tonight, will that continue to affect our bond rating?
I don't have that information. I'll have to find out and get back to you. Eva, do you?
I don't have that direct answer, but with the rating agencies, they continually review the district's finances. And once a year, we're required to send them the audit. So they are going to get your audit as part of a compliance package. And I don't think what you are going to do this evening, if you were to certify negative, is going to impact them in any substantial way. I think probably your audit may cause a response.
Do they get the second interim also, or just the audit?
They formally get the audit, but whenever they think there is something out there, they also get all the news feeds. You know, when I was a CBO in a district, I got a call from S&P, and then they said, hey, we saw this newspaper article that said this, you know, and what does that mean? What's happening in your district? So they do stay informed. So I don't think the negative cert tonight will have a significant impact, because they are also going to get, they've also been seeing all of the news feeds. They're going to be receiving your audit, and they know that you're having a challenging time. They're aware of that currently.
Do we have the ability to send them things like the second interim so they see the numbers and what it looks like in future years, unless there's something drastic that happens between now and May 15th?
We do have the ability to send additional documents to them.
Just a follow-up question to clarify, Ms. Luke. So when you're talking about the audit, that the S&P and the credit ratings agencies get the audit, when you're referencing the audit before for this upcoming year, I want to make sure I heard this correctly, because it was hard to hear you, but were you forecasting that this upcoming audit will be all right, or will be a little problematic because of everything that we've been trying to siphon through? I just want to make sure I understood you correctly, forecasting this upcoming audit.
I think the audit that you receive in December, which is for this current fiscal year, I think it will still be a little bit problematic for you, because it's looking back through all of the issues you've encountered this year. I think you're on a cycle. It's going to take you another year. It's usually about a 2-year time period to get through.
And
This.
just to finish this, just to close this loop, you were referencing that, to your understanding, the agencies, the credit rating agencies may not always get the second interims. It may not be what they're most interested in, but they are interested in the audits. And so,
They always get the audits.
and so that gives me concern. I understand the county is being very clear today, a negative certification, but it seems like if we know this forecasting audit will also still be problematic, that's something that we'll be looking, unfortunately, forward to see how that affects our bond rating. So thank you. I appreciate that clarification.
A question about the audit for 2021, 2022. You said, Ms. Luke, earlier that one of the reasons to certify negative is because we don't have the final audit. We have, I don't know if assurances or estimations. When will we have that final report back?
I can kind of answer that. So we are in process of management replying to the audit. That's part of the process. And so the goal was to have them come present on the April board meeting if everything is finalized at that point. Other questions related to second interim?
I have a few,
Okay.
but I don't. Shelley, go ahead. Go. Couple of questions. I saw somewhere in the report, I can't remember if it was page 70 or page 113, maybe it was both, where there was a question asked as to whether there had been any changing in certain staffing things, and one of them was the CBO, and the answer was no. I assume that was an error that's going to be corrected.
Yes, that was an error that I put on the form. I didn't realize that our former CBO had left officially at the end of last fiscal year, so I clicked no on the box. I've already reported it to VCOE because now that it's with them, I can't make any edits.
All right. Couple of questions here, maybe you can help me. It looks like we had a big jump in classified salaries. Do we know what that's attributed to?
When Eva and I went over this earlier today, my understanding of it is that our jump from last year to this year was because we were able to hire more of our internal staff for instructional aid positions, which made it so that we didn't have to outsource to some of those companies, which is what allowed us to also reduce our contributions to special education this year.
All right. Yeah, because it looks like, I don't know, 500 and something $1,000 more than we had expected.
There's also the raise that's factored in there.
All right. I also see that something called
The
the
potential
five,
raise.
the 5,000s for services and other operating expenses. That's on the sheet you showed us, and we're reducing those dramatically going forward.
Yes, sir.
All right, that answered that. Contributions, that's primarily, again, special ed contributions. that
From
we're talking-
unrestricted to restricted, yes.
All right. Had a couple of other check marks here. Oh, I don't understand what, under employee benefits, pardon me for my ignorance, but what OPEB means.
Other post-employment benefits.
Other. Okay, so other than ongoing health and welfare and unemployment and retirement benefits?
Correct.
And just give me an idea, what does that mean?
I'm not positive. I don't believe we offer anything other than health insurance or retiree benefits.
So you're correct. And what OPEB is on that form is simply your retiree health insurance benefits. That's all.
So we're paying more for health insurance than we thought we were going to be for retirees.
Yes, and Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, but this current year also has the prior year adjustment. Remember, we've going back and reconciling. So you see a bump up in the regular employees' health insurance and you see a bump up in the OPEB, which is the retirees' health insurance.
And as I recall, there were, the numbers just weren't right previously. They were off by, I don't know, $300,000 or $400,000, and that's where we are now, showing that increase.
They weren't reconciled at the end of last year. And so from the January 12th letter to when the second interim was completed, we've been working with VCOE to come up with what we feel is an accurate number for what our liability portion of that is going to be. And that's been put into the budget for this year.
All right, thanks. It just caught my eye when I looked at this stuff, and thanks for explaining it to me. Thank you.
I was hoping you could flesh out nutrition services for me. On page 18, if the state revenue has a huge jump, and I know we are now embarking on the new universal nutrition program, and I was hoping you could just help us all understand how that works and why we're seeing these big fluctuations.
California passed a law last year that gave free meals to all students. It's not normally been the case. And what happens is we file for federal reimbursement first, and then the state approves some of what it's left over. Essentially, they want you to get paid the exact same amount per meal, whether or not it's a student who is receiving traditionally free lunch or who normally pays full price for lunch. Now that everybody's on the same free meal program, we get reimbursed the same amount for each student. And so with a new nutrition services director this year, she's massively regained a lot of the money that we had been left sitting on the table before, which is why we show a giant increase in revenue, projected revenue for nutrition services for the year.
And in the past, we've had to contribute into nutrition services. So this means that we free up more of the general fund in that regard, correct? About 150,000, I thought I saw.
We believe that by the end of the year, the contribution that we've already made to nutrition services won't be needed anymore, and that we'll be able to bring it back to the general fund. But yes, traditionally, we don't make enough with nutrition services that we have to make a contribution every year.
Any more questions?
I had one further one. At pages 114, et cetera, there, were something called review checks. And I looked at some of, I was trying to figure out, one, who enters that input, who says whether it's passed or needs to be worked on further.
So the SACS, the online reporting system, has their own internal check system. You upload your information in a DAT file, and then once you clear out all the errors that you'll run a scan on, it's called TRC, and it tells you if it's a technical review check, and then it'll tell you if something's right or wrong. And if it's wrong, it'd say you have a bad goal and object combination in the account code. So it tells you that that's not valid. You have to go into the books and actually make the change. And then you run it through the check again, and it tells you whether or not it's passed. It's basically a way of saying that, yes, you're spending money in the proper account codes.
Okay, and if there are some items, it looked like there were some things that were labeled as exceptions instead of passed. Are those things that are still being worked on?
Well, there are certain ones that you can clear, and then there's certain ones that you can't clear if you haven't done it prior. So there's a couple of errors that, though they've been corrected, they still show as exceptions because I fixed them after the January 31st deadline. So now they're correct in the budget, but because they were not correct at January 31st when day rolled over, they show as exceptions.
All right, so that was a snapshot as of January 31st,
Correct.
but we're still working on some of those things to take care
Well,
of.
everything else has been corrected since then, but for some of them, they can't be corrected after the fact, so they still show as exceptions.
All right, thanks.
All right, so I just want to thank you for all your hard work and your late hours on working on this. And I know we really appreciate the business office altogether. And I also want to thank VCOE and Ms. Luke for assisting us through this process and getting us in a positive place. Now the decision is how do we want to submit for second interim? I would recommend, and I know this is slightly devastating internally because we have worked so hard to get to a place where our budget is positive. But because I really do believe that we need the ongoing help from VCOE, I would recommend that we submit a negative certification and continue the help with VCOE until we can get the CBO in place. Well, as long as they'll give us the help, really, but I would love to hear from you guys.
I don't really have much to add. Ms. Luke and the advice from the county so far is pretty clear. Certify negative so you can keep getting assistance. And it's really frustrating. But I appreciate the honest timeline that Ms. Luke gave of we're seeing some really promising information and actions, but we're just not there yet. And it takes longer to clean up a messy room than it does to get it messy. So it's really frustrating. I had really high hopes for this week, coming off of last week's meeting, and they're still there. They're still there. But I am definitely inclined to support that motion as well, if it keeps our assistance, and more importantly, if it's coming from Ms. Luke and the county as well. I don't see how we disagree with that. So thank you.
I agree. I do want to add to that, though. I think I like the idea of transitioning, of going out and hiring an interim CBO as soon as we possibly can, and somehow tying it or making second motion or however we go about approving. I know we've got a budget now for a CBO in this year's budget, and we've been looking for a CBO. I guess there's a difference in finding interims. They're probably out there much more available because they come for several months. As Mrs. Luke told me, or Ms. Luke told me, they are less expensive per day than her services, although she's been invaluable. But it would be nice ultimately to transition to somebody who would be here for hopefully as long as it takes until we can hire a non-interim or a full-time CBO. So I don't know if that also is a motion from the board. It's already in the budget.
We can't make a motion on that because it is
It's
not
agendized.
agendized.
It
So
is, it is, however, in the budget, as there is a
Right.
CBO position for this year. Can't we just go ahead and
not at this board
we
meeting.
cannot do that at this point?
Can we advise staff to
Yes.
take whatever actions staff can take to assist us in locating a interim CBO?
We can always advise staff. This is slightly off topic, so I want to just keep to the second interim right now. So I will make a motion to approve the second interim with a negative certification. Do I have a? Perfect.
I have one question. Is now the time to ask question? And the question basically is to staff. It sounds like if we go down this route, we're going to have to do a third interim by June 1st as part of everything else we're doing between now and June. So I guess the question is, can we do a third interim between now and June 1st?
I've heard rumors that Ryan is a
answer.
twin, so maybe we can get his brother to come on over.
I want to just make one comment that I heard loud and clear. I think that we have set on a path, and keeping to that path is what we need to do now so that we get to May 15th and have final decisions made so that we no longer have to certify negative going forward. And so it's important to me that we have a lot of work to do before May 15th and that we start getting that work, working toward that goal. And we've made this plan, and I'm looking forward to us looking at enrollment and having seeing the fruition of this journey. So
We have a motion and a second. So are you guys ready to vote? I'm going to do a roll call vote on this one. So trustee Moncharge,
Reluctantly, yes.
trustee Reyes,
Aye.
Aye.
trustee Halverson,
Aye.
and trustee Griffin.
yes.
And myself, I am a yes. Okay, thank you. That concludes that item.
Thank you, business
Um,
office.
We will now take maybe a 5-minute quick break and then adjourn to closed session.
Are there any public comments?
Oh, yeah.
For
Do we
closed
have any
session,
public
public
comments on
comments?
closed session before we go there? Nope. Okay. Okay, so we will adjourn to closed session and report back out later if any action is taken. Thank you.
Oh, I left.
Cheryl. She's on on Zoom, yeah. Go to your calendar. Invite. Go there. Go to the little thing right there. Calendar. Yeah, your invite. Yeah. No, change it. Join with video. Right. Welcome back. We just finished up our closed session. Just wanted to double check the agenda. The report out from closed session is as follows. In the closed session, on a vote of 5-0, the board approved a separation agreement with Dr. Tiffany Morse. The separation agreement is effective immediately. Through the agreement, Dr. Morse will receive compensation in the form of a severance and vacation payout. Trustee Moncharge voted yes. Trustee Halverson voted yes. Trustee Reyes voted yes. Trustee Griffin voted yes. And I voted yes. This agreement will be a public records and requests for it will be handled pursuant to California Public Records Act. Thank you. That will conclude our meeting. So I can officially say the meeting is adjourned.